Yeah, on.
Two twins. Yeah, buddy. Welcome to episode 48 of Two Twins in an Album. Nubs here, as always, joined by the other twin, T. T, how are you?
Hey-o. Can't complain, buddy. Can't complain. Big show today. Fired up to talk to our guests today.
T, we've done a lot of things on the old podcast here. Today is the first because the first time we've had royalty.
Yeah, it's true. That's true.
And we are so honored and pleased and thrilled and grateful to be joined for the discussion of Urge Overkill's 1993 classic Saturation by Mr. Urge Overkill himself, Eddie King Roeser. Eddie, thank you so should I say King? Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Anytime to talk about that dream of a record, I guess.
Beautiful record. Beautiful record. Can't wait to talk about it. And we go way, little do you know, we go way back with you, good man, back to said records tour. And we both had a little bit of unfortunate nights, unfortunately, at the old State Theater in Detroit, which is now called the Fillmore. They've sold out and changed the name and all that. And you guys were touring Saturation, and we both, Nubs, I don't know if you want to get right into it. I was 13. Yeah. We had a really cool mom who took us to shows, in downtown Detroit, which was pretty awesome at that age. And one of the things, whenever I think about you guys and whenever I think about Saturation, you're always kind of taking yourself back to that time. We went to the show. You guys came out and you were opening with Crack Babies at the time, which was awesome. So you played a little lullaby thing and like everyone's getting jacked up and this was a full GA upfront deal. So, this was the mosh era.
Right.
And when you guys busted into it, especially the chorus, which we'll get to, can't wait to, because I love that track. 13-year-old me decided my skinny ass could, compete in the mosh pit. And I was a glasses kid. Big, thick. I had horrible vision. I've since gotten LASIK. And I got elbowed around, knocked around a little too hard, and my glasses went flying. Probably got stomped, trampled. And I was so pissed off, King. I couldn't see you guys the entire show, except for the first 30 seconds of Crack Babies. And I could hear you, which was awesome. But, when you're 13, you're going to see one of my favorite bands at the time, Urge Overkill. You want to see the guys.
Yeah.
You guys are a trio. It's visually, you guys were all cool. And you just look like a big fuzzball to me for the entire set. So
my vision is not great, so I would not be happy at a concert without.
It was so awesome to see you guys, but it was also kind of a tough night for me back at age 13. That kind of ruined your month. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And King, I thought I could crowd surf. Again, 14 years old. We're twins, so we're the same age. And upon, what is it called? The landing? The dismount? My knee twisted in about 5 different directions that it's not supposed to twist in. And for the rest of the night, I had a swollen knee. And so when my brother and I finally found each other, it's yeah, Urge, yeah. How you doing, man? Oh, my glasses broke. How you doing, man? Oh, my knee's in 3 different places right now. But you know what? It was still an amazing show.
Yeah, you guys kicked ass. We just had a rough night.
The thing I remember most, King, and I want to get into some of the kind of visual, just overall branding of the band was you guys came out in the URGE shirts and it's spelled across the stage.
Yes.
And that was the coolest thing in the world. And I remember you guys also used to wear the UO medallions. And I guess first and foremost, do you have one of those medallions you can give me? Because I would love to have one.
Yeah, or 2. I'd like one too.
I might have we did have a fan club version. They were about as big as a quarter. Now there's a box somewhere. I'll have to look into that, but that's possible.
Those things were amazing. And we're grateful to have been able to see you guys on that tour because it really felt like a special time for the band. And already just hearing you have warm memories of Saturation is a good thing. Because when we interview artists and when we have guests, we never know whether it's going to be, a positive time, a negative time. If it was your first major label effort, there could be a lot of things that went in and out of it. So I guess just first and foremost, just overall thoughts and reflections on that era of the band and what does Saturation mean to you?
Well, it was a crazy time. We were a touch and go band, and the label operated sort of as like a little dysfunctional family where we would have these barbecues either at Corey's house or like Steve would be there, members of the Digits. Sometimes there would be people from Killdozer there. All of these people from these sort of noisy bands who were famously poor at communicating. It's like people who didn't go to parties at a party. So no one really knew what to say. So we cooked meat and drank. Usually just a bunch of guys hanging around. And it was, I guess I look back fondly on it, but it wasn't like, it was a little bit like being on the island of misfit toys. We weren't thinking at the time, wow, we're cool rockers at the touch and go party. It was sort of like, we're the freaks of the world and this is our music. And, at the time, the entity, Urge Overkill, before I would have to say, it was kind of a pre-Sub Pop time and a post-Sub Pop time. Around that time, the thing that really hit really big was we were in awe of, I guess the biggest band on Touch and Go would have been the Butthole Surfers. And if you could get as big as they were, that was like a dream beyond, they were playing middle-sized theaters, but they were truly, that was something to really shoot for, the goal of like having, they had a show and it was, they had somebody projecting movies and smoke machines and all sorts of, they were they meant to sort of intimidate and frighten the audience. And I think they largely succeeded in sort of, we were always hearing all this weird rumors how they all like took acid and had sex with each other. And it was like really crazy, scary stuff. So we were like, giving 7 feet tall. Everybody was scared to talk to him. And it's like, God, this guy is like taking so much acid. I wonder what it's like to be him. So we were really, we were a little more on the level of the local bands that were heroes of ours. I wouldn't say they were local, but the Digits were great at the peak of their powers. I think probably the most exciting rock band I sort of had seen up close. We'd go on to tour with Nirvana and a lot of other bands, but man, the Digits at their best they could smoke anybody. And also the Killdozer, for people who maybe aren't familiar with Touch and Go, but they had done their records with Butch Vig, and that's how sort of Butch Vig got introduced to like punk music. He was in a band that was in Midwest sort of a rock. He was in a band called Spooner from the town Spooner, Wisconsin, and was more like, had the good fortune to be in Madison listed as somebody to record records, and Touch and Go got a hold of him, or I think the Killdozer guys got a hold of him, and people were happy with that production. And it was between working with Steve and Butch Vig. What I would say about that time is no one really foresaw that this style of music was about to kind of take over the cultural place at the top of the charts. Literally, it was the time when, grunge hadn't gone mainstream. And that was something that really turned, I guess it was more of a dream than a reality, to be able to get enough funding to spend a few weeks in the studio rather than a couple weekends. I mean, it really was a thing that worked to our advantage. And I think a lot of music at the time where you had to commit to a certain time, things were going to be done and recorded. So a lot of lyrics and song ideas were last minute. You couldn't call it up on the computer and go back and think about it. So a lot of the records at the time had to do with, sort of committing it to vinyl at the time, or committing it to tape. And tape was really expensive. And I never imagined the day when Urge could have their own studio at home, much less learn how to run it. But after the whole thing happened where Nirvana kind of hit the popular consciousness, it allowed us to, I guess, have access. Anybody at the time could, there was demand for, I guess, punk bands. And we were kind of playing with the idea of doing some of the least, punk, just to be combative. We were, what's the least punk thing you could do is like put on like we sort of got into our leisure suit period where we were going to thrift stores and finding tuxedos just to kind of change the narrative around a little bit. And we got some notice for that, good and bad. And we sort of got a lot of shit for maybe making fun of ourselves a little. Not that everything on Touch and Go definitely had some humor about it. And you knew that, but I think the popular perception is that, oh, these are, this is serious shit and people are like, it's serious. This is all about angst. For us, we kind of went through that angsty period, and we're more like, our first single was a cover of Wichita Lineman, the Jim Webb song. I mean, it was drenched in reverb, and I remember they had just invented the digital delay. So that is like cranked to 10 on everything everybody produced then, but it had like an eerie effect. So it's a real specific time in our career where I sort of remember the last thing really you expected to do in going into music was to be recognized for it on any level, like making it onto MTV or something like that.
There's a tremendous amount of humor and irony within a lot of the album tracks, and that certainly came through along with the image of the band and things like that. And can't wait to dive in it, and we'll do that. But first, Teed, let's take things round and round and find out what we've been listening to, and more importantly, what King's been listening to. Let's go round and round. All right, so 3 albums that have been on your turntable of late. What do you got?
All right, we'll go quick because I want to hear more from the King. But I've been listening to the band, the Big Pink, a little bit.
Oh yeah,
never a bad time for those cats. They were pretty good, I would say. All in all, not a horrible,
not bad, yeah,
not a horrible musical outfit. I've been digging into, you got the summertime coming, and I've been digging into an album we did many episodes ago, which was the finale from The Doors, little LA Woman. It's good stuff. Yeah. It's good stuff. Even if you're not that into The Doors, it's some good shit right there from those guys. My third one, I'm just going to go with, again, a little summertime selection, and let's just go with a little Steely Dan doing Asia. That's what's round and round for me, gents. What do you got?
I got to say that Asia has been something that's been back on my radar as Steely Dan. The more the more you know about music, the more impressive those guys are.
No doubt.
If I want to wake up my mood, I guess I'll just say there were 3 things that I've played, throughout the years just to kind of get me back in, that I never get sick of it. Led Zeppelin Presence, I never get sick of. I don't know. It's such a weird record, made under duress very quickly. I just really love the, obviously the pasted together, smacked out guitar solos are something that I've just totally dig. I never get tired of it. Another one that I sort of grew up on is ZZ Top's De Cuello with cheap sunglasses, all that.
Oh, great album.
I was obviously I was a Van Halen fan, and there was I read something about David Lee Roth was hanging out. He was seen somewhere with a jukebox on his shoulder, cranking that record just when he came out. Anything ZZ Top, I'm still all for. I was listening to one of these things where you play a song and then Apple Music chooses like what you probably are going to like as well.
Yeah.
The one that they played was, it was a Hendrix. So I'm going with all the classic rock, but without choosing it or choosing to listen to it, it was Voodoo Child. The album version was that Spit It Out after I played ZZ Top the other day. And I just really got into listening to that solo guitar. Just, I've still, because I listened to it so many times, that's something that I always sort of speaks to me is those classic rock. What can I say? That's my era. This was all stuff that was on the radio when I was a kid. The Apple thing played a Kiss song that I never heard before, which was amazing. It was a real, I tuned out of Kiss. They have a song called Rip It Up or Get It Up. It was one of those shout outs.
Was it Lick It Up?
Yeah.
Lick It Up. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, what is this? It's Paul Stanley. That is a killer track.
Yeah. It's great.
I probably heard it in the background, but I'm like, sometimes this AI stuff isn't so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's true. The robot sometimes makes some bad calls, but they get it right a little bit too.
Excellent. Well, thanks, King, for that. It's awesome to hear your picks. For me, I tuned into a little Gang of Four Entertainment this week. I think it's one of the better debut albums ever made. I'm not sure Gang of Four ever achieved anything quite as amazing as Entertainment, but love that record and revisit it pretty often. We had some friends over and we needed to find something that was a bit neutral to put on the turntable. So we went with Coldplay as requested, A Rush of Blood to the Head. And that is an outstanding record. It's been a little while since I really listened to it top to bottom. And it's really, really good. It's got hits on it, but really the album tracks are the things that stand out. And then a little bit of Dream Theater for me, because I'm a prog guy, King, and that would be 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence was an album that I checked out during this past week. And T, that is what is round and round for me. So I think it's saturation time. So I think we should dive in. And T, why don't we just get going right off the bat with the Nerdy Deets Done Dirt Cheap? Let's do it.
You want some dirty deeds?
Saturation is the fourth album from Urge Overkill. I bet you there's quite a few people out there that thought that this was the debut effort because it was the major label debut, but it was the fourth album from Urge Overkill. As we've already talked with King about, the band was on Touch and Go Records for those first three. It was released on June 8th of 1993. So as aforementioned, we were 13 years old. It is on Geffen Records and it was produced by the Butcher Brothers, of which I had to do a little bit of extra research. And I found that is Phil and Joe. Is it Nicolo or Nicolo? I don't know how to say it, King.
Phil and Joe Nicolo.
King, tell us a little bit about how the Butcher Brothers came on board and what they brought to the table in terms of the sound of Saturation.
So it's a really interesting story. Little known to us, there was a guy following our career who had been at Geffen, who was from a different, he wasn't from the same part of the company as like the Sonic Youth, Nirvana guys. That was a different like A&R guy. And this was a guy who'd grown up around LA, was into being a DJ and just had really great taste in music. He was a Brian Ferry fan. He insisted we buy some vintage synthesizers and stuff like that. Just, a pretty cool guy who had found himself, I think, working under some of the metal guys over there at Geffen. But for whatever reason, we we found out that he'd been sort of trying to reach us. It wasn't the easiest thing to track somebody down back then. He had the idea to pair us up with, I guess they were a production duo, but they were Philly guys. They were twins, I believe. They weren't identical twins, but one of them was more working with rock guys and sort of was a Beatles technology aficionado of those recording techniques. The other guy was working with Sony and did a lot of work on the Cypress Hill stuff and had a relationship with Muggs. So he was the DJ who came up with a lot of the Cypress Hill beats. And he had also produced Schoolie D. And for some reason, this guy, Mio, imagined us hooking up with somebody from the hip hop world. And this was during the time, like we would have been pretty, it would be when sort of Wu-Tang Clan was getting, there was some, in our minds, there was some crossover between playing a lot more hip hop. And we were living on the west side of Chicago with a lot of, our neighbors were basically Puerto Rican gang members who were, we were sort of picking up all kinds of stuff from that. They were trying to figure out what we were doing, and we got in pretty deep with the, supposed, I guess we thought of ourselves as sort of real outlaws at the time. I don't know if doing illegal drugs every day makes you an outlaw, but, I guess what had happened is, we'd secured a building that was an old bank. Once we got our deal and everything, and we sort of set it up as a clubhouse, we made a plan to record with the Butcher Brothers. This had all happened in a whirlwind after we sort of toured with Nirvana. They had, I think, maybe asked us at the last minute to do some dates. And we went out in the Midwest with them in 91. That sort of allowed us to get the interest in the financing from somebody else, at the same company. We pretty much talked to every label that you could ever imagine, and many that don't exist right now, to, figure out who we wanted to do the record with.
And especially for dudes like us, we're, I think, we're up in Michigan, and this is where we grew up. There was also kind of a Midwest kinship, I think, between, guys like us and bands like yours, where the Seattle thing was cool. There was kind of a foreign attitude to it that, we weren't really used to, but it was cool. Seeing you guys with your humor approach, your tongue-in-cheek approach, not taking yourself seriously,
right?
It was kind of refreshing even back then. And I think that that's one of the things that's really cool looking backward at you guys' sort of impact around that time. There were no rules. You did it your way, and you did it in this really cool, not take yourself seriously, tongue-in-cheeky way. And I appreciate that today. And I even think, even at my dumbass age of 13, I kind of appreciated it too.
Right. It was, it wasn't like a put on, you can't manufacture that kind of humor, that those things that stuff developed over the weeks that we were working. And I've got to say that the Butchers, I think, were in a point in their career where they had nothing to prove. They weren't we actually would play jokes on the A&R guy. He would come, we would literally record like a joke song, try to make it as bad as possible. And we'd be all serious, like, what do you think? And I think the song, there's a hidden track, the one about Kissinger. That was one of the tunes. We were like, well, how do you think of the new direction? I think Operation Kissinger is on Saturation rather than the next one, right?
Yeah, it's the hidden track on Saturation.
Literally the joke we played on the
That's awesome.
This is the best one we got. And he was like, I guess I'm getting the new direction. And it's like, man, we should have seen your face.
That's awesome.
That's really good.
Can I ask you one other Midwesty question? Just super random. The Stull EP, which came out shortly after Saturation. You can see my shirt. I went to KU, which is in Lawrence, Kansas. Is there a connection to Lawrence, or how did you guys pick that as the visual and as the EP title?
There's a total. It did happen. So that actually did come out before all the Geffen stuff happened. There was a guy who put out Liz Phair's music, who was from Kansas, living in the neighborhood right around the corner. His name was John. He was putting out a bunch of New Zealand bands. You'll find out who he is, but he put out the very first like sort of girly sessions or girly tapes when Liz was she was hanging out at the bar. She didn't tell anybody she was doing music. You know, she was she had been an art major, and she was doing paintings and stuff. And the Rainbow was like the artist, sort of like from the 80s. It was more like the Art Institute weirdos bar rather than like this rock place where we ended up kind of taking over that bar and the nightlife. And it was right across the street from the Urge crib. But he had a pal. We hung around with him called Tony, moved to Kansas and was living out on a farm. And we were touring. We were on a regular tour during the Touch and Go days, and we stayed overnight on his farm. And he told us about this haunted, supposedly haunted corner. It's basically a non-existent town with a cemetery, and there's a few skulls buried there. So it just says Stull. This like, it's really mysterious. But we were. I think mushrooms were involved, and there was some paranoia where we were driving to this Stull in the middle of the night. Basically, we scared the shit out of ourselves by getting too high and convincing ourselves that we were in. And that song Stull is about sort of driving to Stull, expecting this sort of scary. I don't know what happened, but we scared ourselves and turned around, and it sort of made itself into a song. I don't know if you want to hear this, but somebody at the University of Kansas was researching urban myths and basically decided to create this urban myth, Stull, that Stull was a gate, one of the 7 gates to hell, and spread it out in the community. And pretty soon the college students were talking about this place, Stull. And this could have been back in the 70s, that it was literally like a manufactured urban myth. We went there because it was legendarily one of the 7 gates of hell, right?
Yeah.
We got to go there, The thing that makes Stull so cool is we sent that guy, John, when he was living in Chicago. We said, we need a picture of this cemetery, Stull. And he came back with the image was so haunting. I don't know if we were thinking about naming a record after, but he came back with this image of this cemetery that was so iconic and so cool. It's like, we're just going to go with Stull. It's just so weird.
That's awesome. And, you mentioned the Neil Diamond cover. I've always kind of wondered, King, obviously that hit so big. And for those of us that, I was listening to Cruiser, around this time of being a teenager as well. And I actually think that was my first introduction to something that was a bit more raw, and because at that point, you were getting into heavy production. This grunge stuff was cool and stripped down, but if you listen back to it now, it's like, holy shit, this stuff's really produced. So Cruiser was some of my early introduction to something that's a bit more stripped down. And then you get through Saturation, and, you guys obviously had some commercial songs and those type of things, which were all great. And then suddenly you've got this massive hit, and it's a great arrangement. And obviously, again, in the spirit of you guys not taking yourself too seriously, you go out there with this Neil Diamond song. And was that a cool thing for you guys? Were you like, all right, like this is lucrative, this is cool, this is, getting us to the mainstream? Or were you kind of like this is a little weird? What was that time period like post Saturation when you had the big hit with the Neil Diamond cover?
Well, that's a great question, because it was possibly something that where the type of success you have, you want to go for, doing what was the right thing. It was a bit of a roller coaster. And I want to lay this out because it really is interesting. And it's was sort of a crucial thing in the fortunes of the overall fortunes of Urge. That was a good news, bad news sort of situation where what happened is we were familiar with Reservoir Dogs and the brilliance of the use of music in that. And we had been really happy with Geffen, and they had people working there, or largely Urge was like number one house band. And they worked so hard to get that record to really hit in the way that it sort of needed to. So if you can believe this, at the time, the time that this thing with the Pulp Fiction came along, first of all, nobody had any idea that Pulp Fiction was going to be like a worldwide thing that made soundtracks sort of cool again, and was like a quotable, that it would enter the pantheon. We were flown out, and the movie with our song cut into it, and they lengthened the song. It's edited so that it backs this overdose scene. And we were just like, this is too cool. We can't say no to this. Obviously we want to have we would have preferred to have a song that we wrote, but no original song was going to be in the movie. No band that was even playing was in the movie. And we found out subsequently that they asked Neil Diamond to use his version, and because it involved drugs, he said no.
Really? Huh.
And we were told, and this is classic myth making, Tarantino said, "Oh, I love these guys. I came across this record at a used record store in Amsterdam." And there was some mythology where he had said something, and where we found out that that's not what happened, is that they were dying to get. If you listen to all the music on Pulp Fiction, none of it's new. They just lucked out. They're like, "You mean there's a cover of this thing?" And after that had fallen through, they called us. And I guess we had no idea that it would be the single because there were no other bands, no other modern bands were, you weren't going to get like the some of the surf bands, the music was chosen for the tracks, but the bands weren't going to be able to go out and say, we're going to, promote this. They wanted an active band. Nobody knew it was going to be a big hit or anything like that. But I think what that did is, put in the public consciousness a song that we really did as a laugh. And you listen to it, it's charming, and there are elements to it that I would never change. But if we had a choice to put out a record or a song that was part of a major movie, it would have been like one of our new rock songs, and it was kind of hard to peg, people's idea of the band was our sort of carefully honed idea of where we were going kind of got consumed by this fact that and it also was an international hit. So it allowed us to go and play, even for years later, we would be able to go and do well in some other overseas markets and things like that. But one thing I do have to say is, and this is incredible when I think back on it, as well as Saturation did, for what they put into it, I think the reason we agreed to it so readily as Exit the Dragon was in the can, and they had sort of found out some of the stuff that we were up to. Kurt was dead from drugs, and they were in some marketing meeting. And I think they were like, they got some bad reports about us, like not speaking, the come down from Saturation and the expectations that it was going to be this million selling record. Like the people at the label were like, you guys are going to be, get ready. and I think created some expectations that just didn't, because of the nature of the band and our non-ability to really focus and get like a great we were all over the place. We were sort of undisciplined with our art and our imagery. And we were just we were not rock professionals, anything but that. I mean, that was death to us. We got the word from on high that they probably weren't going to be psyched about putting the same effort into Exit the Dragon. We felt it was artistic success. It reflected the dark period that came after, the high, the helium high of the saturation period. And it was dark and we were not having a great time anymore. And it was sort of a saving grace because we kind of knew what was coming down the line, is that Exit the Dragon was not going to get the same treatment. It was a different environment. And they're like, we don't want anything to do with any of this drugs stuff. And nobody knew it yet, but we knew that we were going to be coming on sort of hard times. And, had it not happened the way it had, I sort of wonder what our future with the label might have been. It caused a lot of internal divisions within the band, the way that played out. That being our signature song wasn't the plan.
Yeah, exactly. And, what was so you say, obviously there was a lot of external stuff going on. How has you and Nash's relationship been over the long game? I mean, are you guys buddies? Are you just, are you musical partners? How has that sort of been over the years creatively? And just, I mean, obviously you guys have been playing together for a long time. So what's that dynamic like at this, moment?
We did have a classic falling out that was, between, we disbanded basically, and we kind of rebanded to play a couple of shows and ended up doing a recording, Rock and Roll Submarine. And it all came back to you really start out, best pals, then you're sort of like business partners. And then you're like an old married couple. So after a while, I think our relationship is good now. And we're just sort of look back. We're amazed that so many things happened right, because we were just so all over the place and everything's happened so fast that we were quite unprepared for that first Geffen onslaught,
Yeah. Yeah. Are you back in the Midwest, King, or do you live in the Chicago area? Or?
Yes.
That's great. That's cool.
T, let's take the opportunity with King with us to go track by track and drop the needle on Saturation. Let's do it. Saturation begins with quite the dynamic track and certainly one of my favorite songs from the decade, and that is the opening Sister Havana. King, for starters, just what a riff, and the song is built around just an absolute classic riff.
Yeah, I think that the riff was that was largely inspired, and mostly Nash and Blackie came up with that from sort of, we had been on that tour with Nirvana, and it's like, okay, we need something really simple, that's just like as straightforward as you can imagine as a central thing to a song. And it was sort of a self-consciously simplified rock riff that we didn't have to mess with too much. Of course, putting in the bridge and all that came later, but there's a lot of details in it that are like that swell in there. That's an organ. A lot of stuff kind of, we weren't used to playing to a click track, but when you put that click track in there, somebody sort of as a joke put a cowbell in there. We're like, we got to keep that in there.
Yes.
That's like a total synthetic cowbell. It's just playing along with the computer. It's like, man, yeah, that was our first song that we properly worked out every detail. Where you're sort of like, we're going to work on this tune until it's done.
Yeah, you have that kind of sitar layer too, which I think appears in a few other spots on the record.
And that middle section is so effective. I love the bridge in this song.
Those guys really had some classic tricks in terms of how you build out a song like that in ways that we maybe always wanted to do, but they're sort of like, well, here's some of the tricks that, you know, they had an organ there and we did the organ swell and you know, the drums are mic'd just so they don't take up too much room. All this sort of stuff that allowed them to sort of show us how it's done. You know, it was just a lot of fun to hear the result on the speakers. There really was no doubt that was like the obvious first, you know, single thing on there.
Oh yeah.
Track 2, in my opinion, see one of the great uses of the raw synthesizer sound, and that is Tequila Sunday.
This, I gotta say, I learned guitar playing along with Saturation and many other records, and this was the first time I learned how to bend a power chord. So.
Right. Yeah, it's not easy to do the first time. And we were, for years, we were like, man, we weren't thinking about playing this live for sure. That is a chair, you know, you really have to sit down to play that properly. So here we are trying to play this thing for years standing up, and it's just pretty hard to do. That's the whole bending of the whole chord is what makes it.
And King, I'm a drummer, and I can't tell you how many times I did the fill that he does during that break that Blackie did was so cool.
And there's like 1 or 2 extra beats is the key on there.
Yes, exactly.
The mixing of that song, I'm not entirely happy with. And I was sort of getting, you know, whatever you can get to perfectionist about this stuff. So I was, as the primary architect of the song, I was banned from the mixing for the day, and those guys all took mushrooms and mixed the song.
What could go wrong, right? What could go wrong?
Yeah, that's why. So whatever, it stuck. But we had bought this vintage Moog synthesizer, and it's like, well, we got to use it somewhere, and so that's the synthesizer doing the weird sound.
I love that sound. I think it's so cool.
It is cool, and you know what? The synth thing. It goes back to Americruiser. And that was one of the things that struck me about it with this. It was this raw record, but you guys used some keys and some synthesizers at a time where, and now everybody's doing the layer thing. You guys were kind of doing that experimentally at a time where layering that on top of, you know, pure rock wasn't really being done. And obviously Butch produced that record and may have had something to do with it, but you guys were pretty clever and innovative. Even though, you weren't trying to like set the world on fire, but I think you did come up with some pretty innovative sounds for Beck at that time.
I've got to give some props to Nash, because his dad was like a church choir director, if you can believe it. So in Minneapolis, but he had knowledge or more. He was more excited about putting horn charts and keyboard. I was like, Mr. Strip it down, like don't do that. But he had the horn. He had a way to play the horn parts on Empire Builder. He had that all worked out. I mean, we didn't have time to mess around on that stuff, but he's like, we've got to put this stuff in there. And he had other ideas that we really had no time to do, but he insisted that Butch find a way to do it.
It was cool. It was, you mentioned earlier, it's sort of like a marriage. I feel like you two guys, like the chemistry creatively and the way you complemented each other. Cause you're raw rock and roll, which is such a great part of the Urge, such an important part of the Urge sound. And then he kind of brought some of these polish elements that over time you saw more and more bands doing. You guys did a lot of that stuff early. You guys complemented each other really well creatively.
Yeah. And I think working with the people who were sort of willing to go with those ideas quickly, just kind of say, well, we'll try it. And the Butchers were great at that, knowing what to leave in and all that. I mean, it wasn't a terribly fraught process Saturation, it just kind of rolled along, and we really didn't have a whole lot of, there was some drama involved, of course, but what you hear is that genuine excitement is like, this is really working. Like, this is really fun. And to get that through on a sound recording where you put the interstitial part in there, that's one of the things I'm most proud of, that we were, that's going to live forever.
Almost a perfect way to describe track 3 and the second single off the album, Positive Bleeding. So we just gave some props to Nash. Let's continue with that. Great vocal performance from Nash Cato on this song. You were sort of more the primary singer in the albums leading up to Saturation. How did it develop where Nash would take over a little bit more of the lead vocals on this album?
I think that was just had to do with who had the, more songs at the time, the living arrangements at the time and things like that. And I think I'm a pretty impatient person, and I sort of want to bang it out. So I'm not really willing to sit there all day to I'm not always happy about getting the details right or working on it till the details are right. One thing about the vocal track on this is that, the partying was happening and we were up all night, eating spicy food and all that, and everybody's voice was trashed, but Nash had a secret weapon. He had met a young lady who was a nurse who basically took him over the weekend before we did the vocals for this, basically took him out somewhere out in the country and was like, you're not going to smoke for 3 days and you're just going to sit there and get you in shape, because he was not ready to sing some of these major songs. So that was an effort that really paid off, is to say, okay, this is fun, but you have to not talk for a few days. And he sort of went to a short weekend recovery trip and came back and nailed the vocals. And
that's great. Do you remember, was this one, as far as putting it's a hell of a song, by the way. I mean, this one will live on forever.
Yeah.
Right? As far as one of the better, kind of singles of that time period. Did you guys collaborate on the composition here, or was this a song that one or the other of you guys kind of took lead on?
This was of the more collaborative ones, where we definitely remember the chorus was, I think one of us had the chorus and one of us had we wrote it as a duo sitting somewhere in Chicago, and we did gradually add some details to it. So that was a song there was more time put into that and Sister Havana, because those just obviously came off as being really having first time listening potential. So there are tons of details in that too, that we worked to get just so.
Track 4, we finally get to hear from the King. We get the King lead vocal on Back
That's
on
right.
Me. Just solid piece of songwriting. Nice flow. It's a very smooth song and a catchy chorus. Tell us about Back on Me.
Man, that was just, so more of a thing that was written while we were there, just kind of messing around at night. I sort of pretty much came up with that one, and everybody else sort of fleshed it out and ended up having more. It was one of the first songs where we had layers of acoustics and a lot of things going on, and like the cool bell thing in there. That's sort of Nash. I remember the guitar solo was kind of an off the cuff thing that just kind of, I didn't know what I was going to play, and hit a couple sort of really super sweet notes that we just kept. And, it's one of those that just ended up falling in place. That was pretty much a joy to record, but it was fun to have something where we could have acoustic and electric take over.
Speaking of fun, track 5 picks it up with Woman to Woman. It's a jam.
Yeah.
Yeah, if my glasses didn't fly off during Crack Babies, they would have during this song. You know,
Yeah, the crowd really liked this one.
Yeah, you guys hit this live and everyone just went ballistic. It was good stuff.
Yeah, well, we needed a fast, we needed a rocker or two in there. And yeah, I can't recall if that was something we ever did a demo for or what, but that came together pretty quick. And I think that was pretty much Blackie and Nash kind of had worked this thing out. And then there was a really hard bass line that Nash had conceived of, but couldn't really play. And there was some time spent on that. That's got a really tough to play bass line that you can fake, but on the record, it really comes out.
So it sounds like Blackie contributed pretty heavily. I mean, I think his vocals are, especially on Dropout and some of the other things, but it sounds like he contributed pretty heavily at times to the composition here. So it wasn't just you and Nash writing most of the material.
Certainly by that point, he was a real help in terms of kind of breaking he had definite opinions that were, and I think the personality in some of the tracks like that one, that we did have techniques to make the drumming sort of edit some air out of it. It's a really time consuming process where, all these bands, apparently those guys told us, oh, the Stones, Zeppelin did all this. Like, really? They fixed their drum tracks? I can't. They're like, oh yeah, everybody does it. So we put together some of this drum tracks to make them sound superhuman, but not like something like this, Woman to Woman. That's how it actually sounds. And it's got some elasticity to it that makes it really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. What's he up to? Are you guys in touch with him anymore, or is he playing music? Or
I don't know if he's playing much music, but he's alive and well. Yeah.
Cool. Track 6 concludes side 1 if you're listening to the vinyl version of Saturation, and that is the rather tender Missing the Smell of Her, Bottle of Fur. You guys' love of old school true rock and roll just comes through in so many ways in the way that you riff and the rhythms that you choose. And Bottle of Fur is a great example of it.
Is there a little T-Rex going on here? I mean, that's a nice bluesy riff.
That is the glam beat, and yeah, not real fashionable at the time, but that was a song that we had demoed back in Chicago. So that pretty much was written, and the studio version has some bells in the chorus and some nice acoustic guitar and stuff. But that was another song that was pretty much done, and that became a live standard. But we had that one, not too many arguments about that one. Recording it came out pretty well.
It's so cool. I mean, there's that bluesy kind of choppy thing, but it's a really pretty chorus. I mean, the thing I always liked about it, even back then, it was this dichotomy of this kind of blues cruncher, which I always felt like maybe was your part. And then this more kind of sweeping, strummy, dare I say it, kind of beautiful sounding chorus part. Is that kind of what you guys were going for, or did it just end up that way?
Now I understand what it is. It's like a major seventh chord. The harmonies are very close. So you're singing a harmony that's one note separated from the other guy. So it only works on one part of the scale, but it has to be put into a song just right to make it sound, not weird. So you have to sing that it's just a matter of using a closer, like maybe more of a Steely Dan type harmony that's a little more sophisticated than your average song. And again, I have to point to that's Nash sort of knew about that stuff from his choir experience. At the time, I really wasn't sure what made it the way, but now I know, a lot more about music. So
that's cool. That's cool. Never stop learning, right?
Side 2 begins with, I think, probably the darkest, maybe heaviest thing, and the song to break your glasses to. Yeah. What opened our show and what opened side 2, which is Crack Babies. huge drum sound from Blackie, big guitars. This one's just a monster. Great show opener. I guess we should thank you decades later on choosing such a fantastic way to open your show for us.
Well, I had this kind of sick, aggressive riff, which was just kind of a musical idea. And that creepy piano thing was something that was composed by Nash after the song was done. It was sort of like, well, we need something that's, what else can we do to this? And it was pretty much a musical idea. And we were sort of like, what could this song even be about? And I remember this, such was the environment at the studio. Was one of the brothers was like, we knew it was a killer song. We sort of had, we didn't have words really. He's like, I hear crack baby. I hear crack babies in this. And we're like, okay. And that came together like 5 minutes later. We're like, okay, it's crack babies. One of those butchers just threw out a term and it worked.
Love it. So nowadays they call track 7 stoner rock, which has become a genre in itself. I think you guys sort of almost invented it with track 7, which is The Stalker. I mean, King, bands create albums of this type of sound now. Back then, it wasn't called that, but to me, it sounds like what the kids now call stoner rock.
Yeah, who says that Smashing Pumpkins was the fuzz band out of Chicago? I mean,
the story for Stalker is the weird drum and guitar part. That is Blackie and myself one afternoon. We just kicked it out in a matter of like an hour in the basement of the bank. And it was so creepy and weird. We took it to Philadelphia and tried to improve on it. And there was no improving on it. So we basically redid we did the vocals and put that little white noise machine in there. And we added a few things to it, but we tried to play it in the studio and it didn't sound scary. So we imported the tracks from the 8-track and added the vocals and some of the other noise parts. And then I figured out what it was years later is that I never used the neck pickup on the guitar, but that's what it was. By mistake, the neck pickup was on. And I know now, but I never figured that out when we were trying to redo the song. So we could never get the right sound or the right sort of feeling that something's wrong and the tempo is always changing and stuff. So that was just like a one-off miracle that we sort of decided to save. That song took no time, but a couple of the songs took, a week. So that was something that maybe not a lot of bands would do, is just preserve that sort of scary element. And I'm glad we did.
Blackie steps up with, I think this was the encore tee, if I remember at the show. It's amazing how well we remember that show. That's how good it was.
I don't know. I couldn't see. So
I think it was the encore, and Blackie stepped up to the mic and did track 8, which is Dropout. I mean, King, you guys are just covering so much ground on this album. It's such a well-rounded album. This is getting into electronics and this sort of danceable backbeat, and Blackie's voice bringing something new to the table. Tell us about Dropout.
Yeah, it's one of my faves, and I think that the genesis of it was Butcher Joe was working with this guy Muggs, and he had hours of these beats that he would build on the MP digital workstation. Those were what you did hip hop on. And he had just built up a lot of these tracks and was just kind of, sometimes we would come in and he would have them cranking on the stereo, because he was doing other stuff as they were producing this record. So we were listening through stuff like that. And I think that beat sort of we had an acoustic guitar, and I'm pretty sure Blackie just kind of came up with that first chorus, or the idea like, I want to use that and just play this simple thing over it. And pretty much left him to his devices. So he, we all got together and did the final touches on it, but he kind of worked it up from the sampled beats that Joe had been building up, that he kind of had lying around. So that was kind of Blackie and Joe for the most part.
It holds up extremely well. If you go on satellite radio and listen to these like modern alt nation type, I mean, this is what you're hearing, 25 years later. I mean, it's pretty cool. Again, I mentioned it earlier, but this was one of the things that you dug back then, clearly. But now you're looking back and saying, geez, like this, it's amazing how a couple of these tracks where you guys sort of at the time maybe seemed like you were going off the beaten path a bit here in 2021. I mean, that shit, it's what you're hearing. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was obviously working. It's like, I don't think we were going to force ourselves to put something with a beat on there but it was kind of it was in the air in Philly. And we were sort of like, we're going to use some of this, stick some of this in there somehow. And I think it was a very tasteful way of, and also is a sort of an image, we didn't do that one to death. You listen to it, it's not perfectly, and it's just sort of something that just kind of works, but there's still some innocence where we're sort of, the stakes aren't that high. It's supposed to be sort of a fun idea. And I think, we just ended up using that as an encore a lot of times. We had a loop of the beat. So we would just play the beat over the PA and, let Blackie take it away. So that was cool.
The album starts to sort of reach its ending with a song that meant a lot to us because we had a mom who watched All My Children. So we were very familiar with Erica Kane, and wait to talk about the middle section of this song. Let's get into Erica Kane. It's such a cool twist. I mean, you got your like thumping opening, but when it drops out into this cut time deal in the middle, I just think it gives the song so much taste.
Right. He's like, bring in the butcher. I don't know in what way the butcher is coming in there or what, but the tempo change was it's one of those things that sometimes you put two unlike things together and it just works after a while. But I've got to say that the middle part wasn't totally obvious to me which way we were going to bring that. And there's a piano in there and all that. I was probably, frowning into my soup during that part.
Well, it worked for us.
Yeah, it worked. It remains a very popular tune when we play it live. So.
And we get to hear from King again on the lead vocals with the second to last track, Night and Gray. One of my favorite songs just musically, and I'm a sucker for vintage synths.
Yeah.
Is that like a Fender Rhodes going through some kind of treatment, or
you're just cooking there, King?
Yeah. You guys are cooking on this.
That was something that just kind of went down really fast. And, the keyboard is that wasn't something we really knew how to do, but, the Butchers had all that stuff lying around, and it was no big deal to just kind of say, well, let's put a Fender. That's a Rhodes with usually they put it through a phase shifter. So that's pretty much all that is. But when you put it in the right place, it's undeniable. Yeah.
There's just so many different places you can put it and make it sound good on any genre of music. Yeah. It really brings it all together. And what brings Saturation all together is the closer, How 90s, Heaven 90210. Heaven 90210. King, tell us about that one and the way that Saturation closes.
Well, that was the first thing recorded for Saturation. That was the trial run when we decided we should drive out to Philly. We took 80 all the way out there and celebrated on the way back. It's just a very organic, like live performance of the, it's the orange and this amp that we always use with had a real sort of clean, almost harsh cutting sound to it. And just to hear, we've never heard the Neve treatment on our own music, like I said, but just the sound of the drums and all the stuff. That's the sound. That's the song that convinced us that these guys would really do well with our record. And they, there are some very subtle treatments that they got to showcase and we probably wouldn't have done on our own. There was a little bar we stopped by. We were listening to it and we stopped at a place called Tiny's in Elyria, Ohio. It was like a factory town on the way back. And I just remember thinking, we were driving, it was getting to be evening. So we decided it was time to stop at a bar and drink some whiskey. So we got involved in like this crazy dance party at this bar in Elyria, Ohio. But we were just really jazzed after that. And I've never been back there to see it, but there was like a steppers party or something like that. But that might have been the only time when we drove. We drove out there, little old Urge, and driving back and sort of hearing that tune pretty much done, like as you hear it, as something that we did in a few days that just didn't exist a few days before. We were like, this something magical is going to happen. And it did. And, thanks for your, acknowledgement of that.
Well, magical is I think a perfect word to describe this album and what it's meant to see. I think I can speak for us, both of us. I mean, this truly is one of our favorites, and it has been such a thrill to have you join us. We really appreciate the extra time, and we appreciate all the stories and perspective. Any final reflections or anything that you'd say about the album, just to wrap up your time with us?
Well, it did change. It gained us a lot of fans in the way that we got to meet people that we never thought we would meet. A great fan, and to this day of the album, was Chrissy Hine. And we ended up meeting her through this. And it was a whole crazy thing where she showed up at our t-shirt booth one night and sort of was with the band for a few months after that. A lot of shenanigans. We were able to meet Joe Strummer and have some good times with him as well through this recording, and countless other people who it remains on their list. So that's a good feeling.
Well, I'll echo Nubs. Thanks so much. You took extra time with us. We really, really appreciate it. And thanks for not just the tunes, but the personality that you guys brought to this time period. It was very unique. Us Midwest guys loved it. And it's one of those, you guys are special because at the time you knew it was unique. And now you look back at it and it just affirms that you guys were doing things your own way, a little bit differently, with some humor and all those things that us Midwestern rock and rollers like, and very appreciative of everything you guys brought to this time period. And still today, I hear you're recording new stuff, a follow up to Rock and Roll Submarine, and God, can't wait for that. I thought that latest recording you guys did was really good.
It was a gamble at the time to use the guy known for producing Schoolie D to work on the Urge Overkill, and his twin brother. So, but I can't imagine it working out any other way. And, we stuck with him for the next record. It was almost a much darker view, but we feel like the production was also really great on that one too. So thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you, King. And when you're back in Detroit, wherever you play, hopefully it's sometime soon, you'll see two twins going crazy in the crowd, and we will try not to break glasses or hurt knees this time around because we're older guys now. So, we got to take care of ourselves.
Well, come by and say hi afterwards.
We will, for sure. We will. And thank you so much for your time, King. Take care of yourself.
Thanks, King.
Well, T, joined by royalty on episode 48, the King.
Yeah, that was cool, man. That was very cool to talk through that and, get Eddie the King's perspective on past, present, and even future times with Urge Overkill. Those guys are. He didn't want to give us too much on the new recording, but rumor has it those guys are doing some new material. Certainly can't wait for that.
It's always cool to hear, especially someone that came from more of like an indie circle, appreciate the height of the success. You know, I could see some bands and some artists maybe not digging those eras as much or thinking that it's cool to not dig it. But it was really neat to hear the stories and such great recollection of really the commercial peak of this band. All right, T, well, we got to wrap up episode 48 with how we always wrap things up, which is to find out 3 songs that are ringing in your head with In Your Head. In your head. All right, T, what's in your head?
All right, buddy. Well, I got something from a beloved band of both of ours. It's the Secret Machines, and this is it's a Bob Dylan cover, but you know, part of me wishes they would have just had it be their own song because it's such a unique arrangement. You'd never know that they're doing Girl from the North Country, but they did use the lyrics in the vocal line, and you know, but it's a gorgeous. I mean, those of you that even remotely dig the work of Bob Dylan, but also dig space rock, if you have both those, you know, if you have both of those tools in your armor, you know, check out this version of Girl from the North Country. It is just absolutely gorgeous from obviously an outstanding band. The second, I'm going to go, you know, I touched on them during the episode, and another band from Chicago. This is the Smashing Pumpkins doing Rhinoceros, which was one of those strong tracks on the album Gish, which is outstanding. So we'll give Chicago another little shout out there. And the third is, you know, you've talked about U2 and how you're picky about your U2. I'm extremely picky about U2, but the opening track to Achtung Baby, Zoo Station, is a brilliant track from those fellas who every so often got it right. That's what's in my head. Nubs, what is in that melon of yours, big guy?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm going to start with a band that we referenced during the episode as well, and that is The Doors. And an album that you mentioned, which is LA Woman. And everyone should check out LA Woman, our episode, one of the earlier podcast episodes that we did on that classic from The Doors, and the opening track, The Changeling.
Yeah, I remember you saying how much you dug The Changeling during that episode. Nice.
Which T starts out with, well,
you forgot the
and then
yeah.
But I love how the first two notes of the song are chit-doom on the drums. I mean,
it's almost like Bayless told us about Der Bluten Cat being the drum intro. You know, they didn't name the song after the sound of the drum intro, but yeah, it's there.
I love it. Second would be off the second Puddle of Mud album, Life on Display, which was not a very good album, but there's a song on there, an album track called Spin You Around, which is one of my kind of favorite songs of that early to mid 2000s era. And last would be Easy Money by King Crimson. And I really like the live version of that on one of the many live albums that they put out. So T, that is what is in my head, and that is what is in your head, and that is what is in our heads. And I'll tell you what's going to be in my head for a while are some of these songs of Saturation.
Well, you know what's not in our heads?
What's that?
Brains.
Yeah.
I keyed.
Exactly. Well, we want to thank Eddie King Roeser for joining us and giving us all that great perspective. And we want to thank you, T, for just being you.
Me? What, me?
You.
Me?
You.
Well, thanks, buddy. Listen, I do the best I can.
I want to thank everybody for joining us for episode 48. Leave us comments and feedback and such, and make a request. You know, we've done some request episodes. We love getting requests from our listeners. Until the next time, please take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And we will see you for episode 49 of Two Twins and an Album.
Two twins and an album.
Well, that's about it. That's all we have. I hope it wasn't too disappointing. We will see you on tour. Until then, take it easy.